Atlanta, and I would drive over to the University of Georgia to begin my work part-time. I had gone to study with Ted Miller because he was the president of ACPA at the time, and he wrote this book called Tomorrow's Higher Education. The student development movement was well established by then, right? But it was just now beginning to be the gold standard for the theory in the field. All right, this is 1975, 1976. All right? What we're trying to figure out is, according to Kneffel, Camp, Wittek, and Parker, I didn't put, again, most of the references are in here. What interpersonal changes occur? What factors lead to this development? What aspects of the college environment encourage or retard growth? And what developmental outcomes should we strive to achieve? All right? Those are good things to know, right? All right, so it's based on, we start with basing most of student development, we started with stage theories. Now, again, it's been said before by famous, even Einstein said, look, if I see further than other people, it's because I stand on the shoulders of giants. All right? So Erickson based his work on Piaget's work, okay, and others. And then everybody else is going to base their work on Erickson. Now, this is very, very interesting stuff, right? Stage one, basic trust versus mistrust. What is that? It's a baby. It's a baby. If a baby doesn't get what it wants, what it needs, then what? It learns not to trust people, the environment, everything. Okay? Autonomy, shame, and doubt. If there was ever a better definition in 3 words of a 2-year-old, I don't know what it would be. Of what their behavior is. They're trying to figure out where the boundaries are, right? Initiative versus guilt. This is the grade school times. As is industry versus inferiority. And then comes the one that we're interested in college, right? Identity versus identity diffusion. Identity versus identity diffusion. You're going to find a lot of words come back into the literature again and again and again. Diffusion is, identity is one of them. Identity and diffusion is another one. Okay? What's going on between essentially 16 and 25 years old? Not in every case, not at the same speed, culturally different. I understand all that. But what's going on? You're trying to figure out how to break away from your family of origin and make it on your own way. And you're trying to figure out what that even means. What do you mean, my own way? I don't know what that means, right? I'm going to try to figure that out. I've got to figure it out, and we're going to talk about at least 20 different ways of looking at that. That's all we're trying to do in student development, is to describe something that's happening, right? What do meteorologists do? They just, nothing, I know. They describe phenomena. They describe phenomena. They describe things that they see in nature, right? Biologists do the same thing. We describe something, then we try to figure out a way to explain it, right? Then we try to figure out a way to control it, to affect it, right? And then we come up with a larger theory that explains it all, and we start over again. Okay? That's what we're trying to do with student development. We are looking at a series of behaviors, and we're trying to understand them and describe. First, we're trying to describe them, but then we're trying to sort of explain them, and then figure out a way to experiment and to affect them. That's what we're trying to do. Right? So, intimacy versus identity diffusion. Intimacy versus isolation. That happens more or less right after college years, quote unquote. And I know these are all very slippery concepts, but go with it, right? All right, so intimacy versus isolation. What am I going to do? Am I going to be in an intimate relationship with people that, partners and very close friends? Am I? And if I am, what are the terms? Right? Am I going to have walls the rest of my life, or am I sometimes going to let somebody in? And all those kinds of things. I have to deal with that. We move on to a longer period called generativity versus stagnation. right? This is when you get a little bit older, right? When you're as old as Donnie and I are, right? You begin to wonder about giving back. You begin to focus on, in his job and in my job as the dean of the College of Education, part of my job and a big part of my job, and increasingly the most satisfying part of my job is what? Here's a hint. It isn't signing travel papers. Right? It's developing younger people. It's developing the people that are going to replace me. It's developing the next generation of professionals. Right? And then we move into something that I'm looking quite forward to, just based on the title of it, right? Integrity versus despair. Thank you very much. Thank you. No, I'm a 62-year-old guy, right? At some point, I have to decide, was it worth it or not? Did I have any impact? Did I do anything? Am I satisfied? I'm not satisfied like I'm going to quit. Right? Not satisfied like I'm going to stop working, but this is something that I think about, right? And years ago, I figured out that I had already had a better career than I expected to have, right? That takes a lot of pressure off, right? But it's only if what? If I'm not fooling myself. And so I need to check that out a little bit, right? So that's integrity versus despair, right? Now, large brushstrokes, big generalizations. There's of course a lot more within each of these things that he's describing a lifetime. He's describing a lifetime in stages. Stages. That's another word that's going to come back, and we're going to use it all morning. Okay? So identity connotes a persistent sameness within oneself. This is what Erickson said. Self-sameness. This is one of those things. Here's the thing about German words. They never mean one word in English, right? They always mean a paragraph. And so like zeitgeist and all that kind of stuff. That's what this is, self-sameness. Persistent sharing of some kind of essential character with others. Identity formation embodies exploration and commitment. Commitment grows as crises are successfully negotiated. Here's another fundamental bottom line concept. I'm not trying to embarrass you. I'm just going to, you'll be worried about that the whole time. So will I. So. Thank you. So, how does development occur? How does education occur? What happens is that we become aware of, or maybe not even aware, but some kind of a disequilibrium happens. We're feeling out of balance, right? And we develop, or we learn, or we figure out a way to do what? To get back into balance. Okay? So disequilibrium and equilibrium. That's one of the things, one of the fundamental processes. Crisis and commitment in Erickson's terms. Okay, now Marcia took these two aspects and made them the centerpiece of his theory, right? That crisis and commitment are the framework for all decisions about and around your political, religious, vocational, and later doesn't mean later the person makes these decisions later. It means that Marcia later in his work, in his thinking, put sexual decisions in there too. And Josselson later applied this work especially to women. So we have four identity statuses. Four identity statuses. Now this is where we're going to really begin the heavy lifting for this day. If you guys would enter into sort of a longer series of student development studies, of reading this book and doing things like that, say within an office, right? Then you would begin to have different kinds of conversations, okay? You would begin to talk in terms of things like the next four things that we're going to talk about, right? You would begin to identify people as foreclosures, moratoriums, diffusions, or achievements. Okay? So let's talk about those for a minute. The foreclosures, you know these kids. You've seen them. And some of them are, now this is not, these words are descriptive and they're not pejorative, right? Some of the categories we're going to talk about, we wish the kids weren't like that, the students weren't like that, and we're going to try to help them get through it, right? But Foreclosure isn't one of those. Foreclosure means what? The foreclosure says, I'm very happy with my family. I'm very happy with my church. I'm very happy living in Alice, Texas. And that's where I'm going to go back as soon as I get out of college. Okay? And I'm going to live within 3 blocks of my mom. And I'm going to do the same things that she does. And I'm going to cook turkey the same way. I'm going to cook pie the same way. And I'm going to go to church the same way. Okay? I know exactly what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to get married. I'm supposed to have children. I'm supposed to be a school teacher or whatever it is. Right? So why do we call it foreclosure, do you think?
The deal's done.
Because what?
The deal is done.
I'm done. I'm not going to think about anything else. I don't have to. Okay? Now, foreclosure. What's the downside of foreclosure, do you think?
You don't grow.
They don't grow by our definition. This is slippery stuff. What else? Say it again. They're content, but is that a bad thing?
No.
Okay, what else?
They're complacent.
Complacent? Probably. And we don't like that. What else?
Without having had the opportunity to think through a crisis, they won't know how to handle it and does.
If we're not making decisions based on choices, right? Knowledgeably making them based on choices, then what? Then we haven't developed that muscle. We don't know how to do it. This means someone else made choices for us. In the worst of this, and if we do get a little pejorative, the worst kind of foreclosure is what? I never considered anything else because I wasn't allowed to by a dominant person in my family, or because of a dominant sort of environment on the campus or in my church or something like that, right? So I haven't considered this. I haven't considered any other option. All right. So no crisis. There's no crisis. I've just made a commitment, and I'm gonna live with it. All right. In student affairs, I'm feeling what you're feeling, what I'm feeling. It feels kind of icky. I don't like it. Right? Because that's not the students we normally deal with. Right? We're dealing with the ones that are looking and they're trying and they're experimenting and things. All right. All right. Moratoriums. Crisis, but no commitment. The moratoriums see that this isn't working. Whatever they're doing isn't working, and they got to figure out some other way to be, but they don't quite know what yet. All right? Now, you know this kid too, don't you? This is the young person who comes to college and was the Eagle Scout. This is just one example. Was the Eagle Scout, didn't drink, didn't smoke, went to church every Sunday, and they get here and they do what? They go bananas. They go crazy. They're at every party. They're going to check out 3 or 4 fraternities before they decide which one, and they're going to get drunk at every single one of those parties, right? So what happens? They're dissatisfied, and that person may what? He or she, well, it's not going to be an Eagle Scout if it's a she, but well, probably not. But could go back to the other lifestyle, right? They could go back to more probably some kind of a modification in the middle. They can do a lot of things, right? But for a little while, by golly, I've never tried anything, and so what I'm going to do to make that better is I'm going to try everything. Okay, and that's not going to work either. Right? We know that in student affairs, but there's where those kids are. And if you had a way to talk to the kid when you saw that happening, saying, you know, there's this theory. Let's have a chat about this, right? Okay, or diffusion. Diffusion. No crisis, no commitment, lost and sometimes found, Jocelyn calls them. Okay? The second of each of these, for Jocelyn, the purveyors of the heritage. They're the guardians of their family heritage and so on. Daughters of the crisis, because she was talking about women. Lost and sometimes found. Diffusions really are as close as we're going to get to pejorative. Right? Because why? These people don't know what to do. They flat don't know what to do. There's no crisis, no commitment, because why? Because they're not regarding themselves reflectively. They don't think they have an option. They don't think they're in charge. They're certainly not in charge right now, right? And what do we have to do for them sometimes? Sometimes we have to substitute our value system for them for a little while, if it's bad enough, if they're just drifting, right? Now, we've got to be so terribly careful about that. Because in student affairs, we have a strong value system, right? We have a strong, there's a place we want them to go and a place we want them to be. Now, we don't always say that, and the parents don't always want to know that, and the students don't always want to know that, and we've got to be careful about it because we can't be substituting our decision-making for theirs, right? We set it up so that they get to make the choices and we teach them how to make the choices, but we don't get to make them. Then there's the identity achievements, crisis in commitment. This is what everybody in this room thinks they are, because every single one of my students in my class, when we're teaching this, they believe that that's what they are. And to some extent, we all are. Now remember, these aren't pure categories either, right? But what is this? Identity achievement is what? You are experimenting appropriately, you are making meaning from those experiment, and you are eventually working your way to a place where you're getting away from an external locus of control into more of an internal locus of control, okay? And eventually you will find yourself someday in a place where what? I'm in charge of my life, I have responsibility for my choices, I understand that I'll take the consequences for my choices, and I'm okay with that. And it's not like my life used to be in Alice, Texas, or in Dallas, Texas, right? But it's my life. It's my way. I understand much more about that now, and I'm okay with that. Okay? Identity achievements. Okay? This is a fundamentally wonderful kind of a way to think about things, right? Now, you understand that in each of these theories that we're going to be talking about, 15 or 20, whatever it is today, there's a full book about this. There's several books about this. There are research studies about it. And we could go on and on and on, right? And you're probably thinking I already have. So, all right, so psychosocial identity developed then. Two critical points. We're going to talk about a family of theories now. These statuses, the ones we just looked at, the moratorium, diffusion, this and that, they reoccur in varying forms in many theories and formulations. They appear universally useful in understanding development. I think they are a good way to think about stuff. And we can, you understand what I meant a while ago now when I said we could have different kinds of conversations? Because you could talk about X student and say, okay, now this is clearly a moratorium stage and for this person, and we need to do what? We need to watch this and notice that at no time do my fingers leave my hand. We need to +1 this person. We need to +1 this person to start his journey out of moratorium. What does that mean? We'll find out in just a moment. Okay, we got to guard against labeling, even though we want to have this conversation. We got to guard against judging for sure. There's no such thing as a pure status, and there's no such thing as a permanent status. Okay, so now, Chickering, the famous Chickering. Right? I told my students I'm an intensely practical guy when it comes to them getting jobs, right? I tell them, look, if you don't learn anything else, you have to have an answer to the question, what kinds of theories do you like when you're being interviewed? What kind of theories do you want to use in your work? And the correct answer is always Chickering. The correct answer is always Chickering. Now, he wrote his first book about education and identity in 1969. In my generation, the dude was a rock star. Okay? He is the man who basically invented stage theory and student development, right? And it was, he didn't invent it. I mean, obviously Piaget and Erickson, blah, 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 but Chickering is the guy, right? And it became now Chickering and Reiser when he redid the book in 1993. All right. So, developing, he says 7 vectors. What do we know about vectors? Why do we call something a vector instead of just a number? Anybody remember? It's high school math. Because it has direction and magnitude. Magnitude and direction. Okay? An airplane is flying this way, the wind is blowing this way, the airplane actually flies that way. Correct? Okay? Magnitude and direction. All right? So that's what's going on with these students. At any given time, at any given, in their world, they are working on developing competence, and in this magnitude, right, with this much emphasis, and they're going this direction. They're also working on managing their emotions, but only with this much magnitude, and it's going in this direction. You with me? And so then we put all that together, and that's how the kids work walking around through the day. Okay? All right. So developing competence is this is going on, if you'll think about this, we're describing what happens on a college campus. Remember that? We're still doing that. We're developing competence, intellectual competence, physical and manual skills competence, right? And interpersonal competence. I entered college 6'1" and 170 pounds, right? I was still growing. My hands and feet were the same size they are now, right? In 18 months, I grew 2 inches taller and 50 pounds heavier. I became an intramural football terror. I could dunk a basketball, right, at 6'3", which in the early 60s for a white kid was unheard of, right? And so why? Because I was still learning skills. I was still learning manual coordination. I was still learning things that I didn't know physically. And then interpersonal competence. And tragically, I'm still working on that one. But that's not the point. Okay? Now, that's what's going on with these students. You see it daily. You see it again and again and again, right? If you begin to think in these terms about what you're seeing with your students, you see what a wonderful shorthand they give us to speak about the development of the students. Okay? Okay, managing emotion. The ability to recognize, accept, express, and control emotions, as well as to act on them responsibly. This is happening every single day. How many of you advise a student organization? Okay, not a few people, all right? But you've been around them, right? So you see the executive committee of a student organization. Does most of the drama center around meeting deadlines and making sure our paperwork is getting in on time? No. Most of the drama centers around, well, you're insulting me and you said this and that's not true, and why are you making me do this, and you don't like me, and blah, 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 blah. Right? So what are we doing? We're learning to manage our emotions, right? We're learning our interpersonal competence. We're doing all of those things. That's what's going on. That's what we do in student affairs. We help students do those things. Okay? Moving through autonomy toward interdependence. Huge, 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 huge. Okay? Emotional and instrumental independent awareness of interconnection. All right? This is what? This is the thing I don't like about student affairs. There are lots of them. There are more than I love, but there are lots of them that I don't like. One of them is what? So, if Donnie says to me, come down to Corpus Christi and give us a little talk, and I say, okay, how do I get to Corpus Christi? Because I know there's 3 different ways, right? And I started to take the 181 or the 80 or whatever it is, right? I started to do that. But I'm told nowadays you can't do that because you can't go 50 miles without getting behind 2 convoys of shale trucks and stuff like that. So you can't do that anymore, right? Okay, so go down, he says, go down, just take 37. It's way easy, and it's boring, but it's easy, and you're just right here, okay? Now, here's what we do with our students. We tell them, or we know the trip they're about to take, right? In the next 4 years. We know what's going to happen to them. We know they're going to run into trouble with same-sex peers. We know they're going to run into trouble with partner intimacy issues. We know they're going to run into trouble with separating from their parents. We know they're going to run into problems regulating their own diet and their own hygiene and all of those. We know these things. They're going to run in trouble with STDs. They're going to run into trouble with alcohol and drugs. We know this. But we keep it a secret. We even know how to give them a roadmap about how to get to Corpus Christi, how to get to the goals we want them to get to. If we could put some kind of simple formulation of a couple of these theories and hand it to them. But we don't. We refuse to. Why? Doesn't make any sense. Doesn't make any sense. The only thing that makes less sense than that is if we're not looking at the map because it already exists. We're looking at the map today. Okay? We don't tell the students. We've got to. We've got to do more of that. All right. Developing mature interpersonal relationships for tolerance and appreciation of differences. Capacity for healthy and lasting intimate relationships with partners and close friends. Okay? We used to call this, and this was a function of being in 1969, relationships with same-sex peers and romantic relationship. Well, you can throw that out the window these days, right? So what we're talking about is relationship with close friends. That is something that the students have to learn to do. You and I had to learn how to do it. Why wouldn't they need to learn how to do it? Right? Okay, whether they're men or whether they're women or whatever, I had to learn what do I do when I'm feeling emotionally intimate with someone, but it's not a romantic relationship. What do I do with that? And every student is dealing with that, and you know it. And so we need to make sure that they understand that it's not an unusual thing. Okay? And the partners, of course, partners. And we've got to figure out this whole notion of partnering, whatever. All right. So then we put some of these together, and these are, the vectors are kind of hierarchical. They're kind of in order, right? They're kind of cumulative. They're kind of in a spiral. It's a very difficult kind of a thing. So establishing identity is one that puts almost all of the other ones kind of together. Okay? So we want to establish comfort with your body and appearance, comfort with your gender and sexual orientation, okay? Gender and sexual orientation, and a sense of your social and cultural heritage. Look at what we're talking about, those three things there, right? That is shorthand for 78% of student affairs right there. Right? I mean, this is stuff that we have to do. We have to deal with. Right? Okay. We want a secure sense of yourself in light of feedback from significant others, self-acceptance, self-esteem, personal stability, and integration. Integration of all of those other vectors. Developing purpose. That's clear vocational goals, a meaningful commitment to lifestyle choices, and strong interpersonal commitment. So again, this is a cumulative one. This is a composite one, right? So based on everything we know now, I'm going to develop purpose. I'm going to figure out the kind of person that I want to be consistently. The commitments that I want to make. Okay? Years ago, there was something called values clarification when we were kids, when we were children. We used to do things like growth groups in our 20s, right, in student affairs, right? And there's a guy named Sid Simon who was a very bizarre person, but nonetheless he had some interesting things to say about values clarification. What is a value? It's something that you choose. You choose it from among alternatives. You choose it from among alternatives with knowledge of the consequences of your choice, right? You do those three things and then you act on it. And then you act on it consistently. Okay? And if you don't do all of those things, then it's not a value. It may be a belief, it may be a pastime, it may be something you're deluding yourself about. But if you don't do all those things, it's not a value. Let's make an example. If you believe that racism is wrong, and that telling racist jokes is a wrong thing, you choose that. It may have consequences in certain kinds of environments, right? You accept those consequences. You move on. You begin to act on it. You stop telling racist jokes yourself, right? But then Uncle Henry at the Thanksgiving table tells a racist joke. What do you have to do? You have to confront that behavior. If you do not confront that behavior, then what? It is not a value. Right? It either is or it isn't. And so if you don't confront it, it's not a value.